Like it when it works. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a long time since I was back in this building. Lots of fond memories and a few nightmares. Many of you will reflect upon. It is certainly an honor to be asked to speak to the Defense Ethics Program as part of the Defense Ethics Awareness Week. As one who retired many, many years ago, I've given a lot of thought about what would be relevant to speak about today. Not that the subject of ethics is necessarily perishable. Many of the principles are long-standing, but it does concern me that having been retired for 13 years, maybe some might consider my views not applicable. Judge. In the final analysis, I elected to speak on ethics and the Army culture. Am I getting feedback here? At this? Okay, is that better? I want to provide you a personal perspective on how important culture is in shaping ethical behavior. I will explore some aspects of the culture of the Army and its impact on ethical behavior and suggest some implications for changing that culture. It is, of course, a very, very broad subject, so not one necessarily easily addressed in the time that I have, so I'm of necessity going to narrow my focus considerably. Before I start, I have a number of cautionaries, if you will. First, I believe that the Army ethos and the ethical conduct of the vast majority of soldiers, indeed all men and women in the service, is good. I think you need to understand that as a setting. However, the very nature of Army culture does pose risks, and it's that which I'm principally going to speak to. Second, I'm using the Army as a frame of reference, as it is the organization with which I'm most familiar. That does not imply that the Army is either better or worse than the other services, or indeed DND as a whole. Indeed, many of the lessons that I'm going to talk about, in fact, I believe are quite relevant to the Canadian Armed Forces. But all organizations face cultural challenges to a greater or lesser extent, and the Army is no different. Third, in all cases, I'm generalizing, as one must given the limits of time. Organizational culture is not static, nor is it the same in every organization. So there are variances. Any discussion of military ethics has to start with the military ethos, as it's the foundation of ethics in the Canadian Forces. Military ethos provides the basis of all aspects of military service and forms the ideal that men and women in uniform are expected to live up to. Its fundamental values of duty, integrity, courage, and loyalty are the keys to the ethos. Duty entails service to Canada and compliance with law, and motivates people to strive for the highest standards of performance. Integrity means doing the right thing. It demands honesty and adherence to high ethical standards. Courage is the willpower and the resolve not to quit. It is not just physical courage, but includes moral courage, or the strength to stand up for what is right. And loyalty means allegiance to Canada, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the chain of command. But importantly, it includes loyalty down and places special responsibility on leaders for caring for their subordinates. So the ethos really is the ideal that everybody in uniform is expected to aspire to live up to. In my mind, it is the gold standard for ethical conduct. Opposite ethos is culture, which can be described as a collective way of life, or more succinctly, the way of doing things, the way we do things in our particular organization. Culture is the reality we find in an organization and how the organization behaves. So if ethos is the ideal of military behavior, the level that we're trying to live up to, culture is the reality of how people within the organization act. The challenge for the military is to continually shape that culture, to improve it, and so align it with that military ethos. So we have the ideal and the reality, and we're all working to get there. All organizations have a culture that reflect the unique actions or approaches that differentiate it from other organizations. The cultures are different in part because of the nature of what the organization does, but also because of varying social norms in terms of how people interact. So while military organizations have cultural similarities, there are also a number of differences. Any serviceman or woman who has moved from one service to another has experienced those variations in culture. In the same way, organizations like NDHQ have a different culture, in part because of the large civilian presence and, of course, the proximity to political leadership, which I'm sure many of you experience on a regular basis. Ideally, each of those cultures evolve to serve the overall needs of the specific organization. By establishing norms of behavior, the group rules, if you will, everyone knows what to expect of them, and the organization acts effectively. In the case of the Army, culture is critical in achieving group cohesion that achieves a tight team that operates as one. And I have to emphasize that really is the key aspect of the Army's culture. It is important, as the Army must operate and fight in an environment where everyone must act as a team to be effective. Now, of course, everybody can say the same about the other services, but in some degree, the Army is unique. Sailors on board ship go where the captain says the ship's going to go, and they don't have a lot of choice about it. In the same way, the aircrew have little choice but to follow the pilot. The Army, on the other hand, consists of many soldiers spread out over a wide area, all with the potential to act independently. And when faced with danger, a soldier has many opportunities to avoid it. And human nature being what it is, that's the natural reaction. There has to be something to motivate that soldier, him or her, as part of the team, to follow orders when faced by personal risks, to charge the machine gun, if you think of it in those terms, when ordered to do so. And culture has a major role in developing and sustaining that group cohesion of creating a commitment that will subordinate personal interests to those of the group. The Army culture includes strict adherence to orders, a codified doctrine that ensures all know how things are done, and most importantly, a degree of unity that creates a sense of belonging, respect, and trust. We're talking here about team bonding, and culture is the social glue that binds that group together. So how does the Army achieve that cohesion, that critical sense of belonging? Doctrination to the culture, or acculturation, if you will, starts the minute a recruit signs up and continues throughout his or her military service. This process of acculturation occurs in every group, military or civilian. When you join your respective organizations, it took time for you to understand the many written and unwritten rules and the processes within it. You didn't immediately understand the group norms, and it took time before you felt that you were part of the team. That's true of anybody joining any organization. But given the Army's unique culture and the criticality of cohesion for operational effectiveness, that process cannot be left to chance. So acculturation takes on a very, very significant part of every soldier's basic training. I joined the Army in 1964 at the age of 16, so I qualify as an old guy. I went through basic training as a soldier, and the essence of the program was to place recruits under great physical and mental hardship, in part to determine individual stamina, but in great part to force the team to work together. Faced with fatigue induced by constant activity and mental pressure principally from instructors who wouldn't let up on their demands, it didn't take us long to realize that life would be easier for the group and for each and every one of us if we acted together. They, the instructors, became virtually the enemy, so we banded together to look after each other in the face of that onslaught. This forced us to get to know each other, to understand individual strengths and weaknesses, and to work together as an effective team. In time, the group developed a sense of pride that it had overcome the onslaught from instructors. This pride led to competition with other groups. And again, in time, there emerged symbols of group identity. Someone made a group flag. Another suggested a group song to march by. All of this a natural bonding reaction to the conditions that we were placed in. When we graduated and went to a field unit, we were introduced to a new group. As newcomers, it took time to be accepted, but in time, we felt similar bonding to that team. This acceptance to the culture was vital to the team's effectiveness. Being part of a close team gave us a sense of belonging, and the strength of the team gave us confidence to undertake difficult tasks. We realized we were not alone. The team was protective and would support us in any condition, defending us against other groups. As I advanced in the military, this socialization of the culture continued through courses and training, and informally in messes and other social environments. All of this was good, and exactly what the Army expected of a fighting organization, building that tight cohesion, that tight bonding of the group. However, not everything in that process was positive, and I learned very quickly that there was a downside to this culture. One of the attributes of such cultures is that these groups develop a sense of exclusivity, which tend to marginalize those that are different, those that don't conform to the group norms. In my basic training group, all of us were white, Anglophone males. That, as far as we were concerned, was the norm. That's what every group would look like. Halfway through my basic training, we had a few Francophone soldiers join the group, and at first they were ostracized. They didn't fit in. They were different. And that's the way they stayed until they had proven themselves. Had there been racial minorities or women in the group, a similar reaction would probably have occurred. The reality, as the group saw it, was that real soldiers were white, Anglophone males. That's the way we trained. Not explicitly, we were never told that, but it's what we experienced, and we were successful as a group. This was the norm, and anything different from that was resisted. Not surprisingly, the language used in such an environment was not something my mother would want to hear from me. Indeed, I'd never used such language before putting on the uniform, but it was the norm of most of our NCOs, so it became the norm for us. And verbal abuse from our senior NCOs was a normal means of putting mental pressure on us, so that kind of conduct became part of our norm as well. We normalized crude, abusive language. It became part of our culture. Humor is also an important aspect of dealing with the strain, and as in all such organizations, gallows humor was a natural fit. My wife's a nurse, and she talked about her life working in the operating room and such places, and many of the jokes and the humor, gallows humor, was similar. But in our case, it went further than that. Jokes based on sexual or racial innuendo became the norm. Now, all things considered, this group was a well-adjusted collection of Canadians in the mid-1960s, and most, if not all, had been brought up well by their families. But through the process of acculturation, we had developed norms arguably different from society. We were a breed apart. And here the strength of the unit became one of its weaknesses. By far the greatest aspect of this cultural dynamic was the reality that our first loyalty was to the group. And internally, the culture and the actions of the group were not challenged. If we had concerns about the group culture, we didn't express them. And our automatic response, should anyone question the actions of our team, was protection of its members. Everyone supported the group norms, and despite being raised to a different standard, and knowing what was right or wrong, generally voices were not raised against inappropriate action. Sociologist Donna Winslow, who was important and very much involved in Army study of the subject, once noted the following, and I quote, "The bond created by the regimental culture is almost familial. A happily bonded family functions well as a team. However, when negative behaviors emerge, that same bond can lead the entire group astray." She then went on to say, and I quote, "Misplaced loyalty can lead to stonewalling, preventing the proper investigation of criminal activities, and also preventing individuals from speaking out against inappropriate behavior, which can therefore continue unchecked." Fortunately, for me and my group, The transgressions I witnessed during the early period of my career were very minor. Indeed, by comparison to some of the group conduct we see in society today, our behavior was conservative, but the risks were clearly there. Thankfully, I recognized early on those risks and was able to balance my conduct within the culture, but the pressure on the group was ever present. As Army commander in 2000, when implementing reforms for the Army culture was a major concern to me. Given the risks I've highlighted and a number of critical failings within the Army in the 1990s, it was clear to me that change was necessary. While many reforms had been instituted by the Canadian Armed Forces and by my predecessor, they, in my view, didn't go far enough. And I knew that we had to change the Army's culture. But that's easy to say, it's not easy to do. To many, this is a simple problem. The leadership just has to give direction, to halt inappropriate behavior, to change the way we do things, and enforce that direction. That's all you had to do, is give orders, and it will all happen. It's not that simple. We need to recognize that we are facing what psychologists refer to as an addicted culture. That is to say, a culture that is so strong that it becomes part of the very makeup and self-worth of the individual. Because it's that strong, changing it in any way, giving it up, is like an alcoholic ceasing to drink alcohol. In trying to force change, soldiers feel as though everything they believe in is being invalidated. And in order to change, soldiers have to go through that grief cycle. It's exactly the same process. Even more challenging, you're trying to make those changes with a strongly bonded group, all of whom share the same culture and all of them have the same level of resistance. This issue was so important for us that we identified one of the Army's 4 strategic objectives to, and I quote, shape Army culture. Because we really didn't fully understand how to change it, and we need a lot of work done there. As part of this, the Army undertook a number of studies to better understand the state of culture within the Army and to determine means of shaping it for the future. In 2005, the results were published in a report, Canada's Soldiers, Military Ethos and Canadian Values in the 21st Century. While this volume is clearly dated, it's over 10 years old, it makes very interesting reading and gives sound research on which to guide change. I'm not sure the degree to which any of the changes as a result of that work were implemented, but my sense is very few. Now, much has changed in the intervening years, not the least of which is over 10 years of operations in Afghanistan. However, based on my personal exposure to the Army over the past decade, and I've had a number of opportunities, and my discussions with soldiers at many levels, I feel reasonably confident in saying that many of the same issues are at play today. Things have not changed that much. Clearly, the Army's objective to ensure cohesion is very much the same, and many of the same acculturation mechanisms are used today. So what can be said is that the basic dynamic of building group culture and its effects are similar. Is it where it needs to be today? I would argue probably not, as evidenced by a number of incidents made public in recent years. So what are the lessons from this? Not only for the Army, but for all organizations with such strong cultures when implementing cultural change. As with all of this subject, there are many components to the problem, but I will focus only on 3 factors that I believe are key to achieving success in shaping military culture. And I emphasize that while I'm talking about the Army, I believe that all of these issues are equally applicable to other services. The first and I believe most important factor to recognize is that in the challenge of changing culture is the need to win and maintain the trust and confidence of soldiers at all levels. This may sound odd for an organization that prides itself in following orders, but the reality, borne out by many studies, is that the trust in and loyalty to the senior leaders within the organization is low. Soldiers are loyal to the group, but much less so to the chain of command. And the further away leaders are, the less they are trusted. And if you don't believe me, do your own research. This is perhaps not surprising in an era where elites at all levels are under scrutiny, and the public is treated to presentations of the personal and professional failings of those leaders from all walks of life. And I would expect those in uniform are no different. But it is potentially disastrous for an army, or indeed any military organization, when it's trying to change culture. Only by creating a climate of trust can we expect soldiers to accept the change that is uncomfortable to them. Only in an environment where soldiers feel confident they have the support of their leaders will they stand up and be counted, even in defiance of the group. In short, building trust and establishing the credibility of the chain of command in the mind of soldiers is an essential precondition for any significant change to culture. The key to winning that trust, and indeed changing culture, is leadership. And leaders at all levels must play in many important roles. First of all, leaders at all levels are the example. Leaders must walk the talk. Practicing the old adage of do as I do, not as I say, which my father loved, is not a recipe for success. It's a recipe for failure. An officer or NCO speaking in a disloyal fashion about the Army or its leadership undermines the institution. And conduct extends beyond the workplace. A soldier who sees his officers or NCOs behaving badly in the community quickly loses respect for them. Leaders are on display at all times, and the example they set says far more than any of the words they mouth. Leaders also have to be the policeman and ensure the values of the military that the military stands for are maintained. Too often leaders say the right words on ethical conduct and imply accountability for actions, but don't follow through. They don't hold people to the ideal, which creates a conflict in the mind of their subordinates. The officer or NCO who turns a blind eye to disloyalty or misdeeds, or fails to enforce standards, demonstrates to the soldiers that our ethos is only words. The Army ethics officer has a quotation that he uses regularly from the former chief of the Australian Army, which says, and I quote, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." Some may prefer the motto of the Royal Canadian Regiment, which says, "Never pass a fault." Whichever you prefer, the philosophy is paramount, or has to be paramount, where leaders are concerned. Leaders need to hold other leaders to account for their actions, and failure to do so erodes trust and undermines attempts to change culture. Finally, leaders must lead. And I mean by that, leaders have a vital personal role in educating their soldiers and shaping culture. It's no good delegating the training and education of ethical matters. And as good as the unit ethics officers and NCOs may be, they cannot replace commanders in educating and setting the standard. Leaders must be the flag bearer for changing culture and living up to the military ethos. Soldiers want to hear their leaders, their commanders, explain what is to change and why. They want them to state clearly their expectations and to respond to their often difficult questions. And this is not a one-time affair. It requires regular, consistent expression of expectations, and also requires the setting and maintenance of the environment which will permit change to occur. Thirdly, leadership is vital in changing culture, and leaders must educate, must set the example, and ensure consistent accountability. Without that leadership, change will be elusive. Finally, a priority in changing culture is the need to change how we train. Here I'm referring to education and the acculturation process, which today is a far more difficult process. We have a new generation of men and women which is far more sensitive to its own needs and personal rights. But group cohesion is still important. How we achieve it is open to real opportunity. We want soldiers to band together as a team to achieve the cohesion essential to military operation. And interestingly, I believe many young people today are actually looking for that kind of identity. But the process and the team produced must be different as reflecting the reality of the Army and society today. That means, in part, giving soldiers a new model to aspire to. In too many cases, I believe soldiers still hold the traditional view of the Army team. What does that group look like? They see it composed of a 6-foot, 200-pound muscular man who are trained to act as one, a well-oiled machine. I think of this as the industrial age model of the group dynamic, based on the requirement for mass. A model useful for one type of engagement, but in my view, lacking in flexibility. Such a view was perhaps useful for the Army in World War I and the Cold War, but has never been accurate and arguably is even more out of date in the modern era. But too often soldiers see this as the only form that the Army team can take. When women and minorities don't fit the model, they don't consider them up to the task, so they shouldn't belong. And attempts by the military to impose these groups on them are seen as political correctness and discounted. Today, the Army must provide a new model for them and educate soldiers to accept it, and as we indoctrinate them into the military. We should be thinking of a team of many different members, bringing different strengths to the group, and trained to act together to accomplish the mission. Not just the 200-pound man, but the 100-pound woman and soldiers of many different sizes, shapes, and cultures, all unique capabilities, all with unique capabilities to contribute to the team. I like to think of this as the Cirque du Soleil model, typified by many athletes of different sizes and genders, each with their own unique skills, displaying tremendous feats of strength, agility, and flexibility. This team is one with the capability and the versatility to understand any task in the modern era. Realizing group cohesion on such a model means teaching soldiers the value that each individual and each culture brings to the team, and respect that contribution and the dignity of all. But far more than that, it means putting that model into practice, both in training and operations. Such a shift in culture and the acculturation process is not easy, but is essential if the Army, and indeed the Canadian Armed Forces, is to optimize the contribution of men and women who put on the uniform in today's society. Well, in the time I've had available, I've tried to address what I think is a fairly complex subject, but hopefully, I've given you a better understanding of what at least I think culture is, in particular as it impacts the Army and its importance in creating and maintaining an ethical military institution. The final analysis, I believe that the majority of soldiers, indeed the majority of men and women in uniform, are ethical and do the right things. The challenge for leaders is to set the right environment, ensure the culture fosters a group that reinforces doing the right thing. But getting there demands positive leadership by leaders who are flag bearers for cultural change, who set the example and ensure others act accordingly. And by shaping the acculturation process and developing trust in soldiers, it sets the scene for an Army and an armed force with an effective culture that lives up to the military ethos. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my remarks, and I'm certainly open to any questions or comments you may have.